politicians may be talking right now to try to resolve this enormous crisis that Israel finds itself in. And those judicial reforms planned, which have been paused, which caused such outrage, have now been paused in an attempt to try to de-escalate matters. But this is anything but settled. As you can see behind me, thousands have gathered in Tel Aviv tonight in support of the government's attempts to curb the powers of the judges. And adding to this is another dispute now which is adding fuel to the fire, with talk of Israel's far-right ultra-nationalist security minister potentially getting a security force he's craved for so long. If Israel is at a crossroads right now, trying to determine what sort of democracy it wants, then the sides in this dispute appear as far apart as ever, with many fearful of what this rift might bring. Israel's alarming descent into constitutional crisis may have paused for talks, but still simmers with tension. On Monday, its right-wing government saw its planned power grab from the judges delayed. Some behind the reforms are now urging their supporters, like the thousands here in Tel Aviv tonight, to awaken.
We are here to support the government.
And they are in no mood to back down.
Must have reform, because the situation in Israel is very bad. The majority of the people want this reform.
We're talking about real, serious problems. These people they think they're the only owners of this country and this government. We are the majority of this country.
What they want in judicial reform, others in their masses have decried as an outrageous assault on democracy. Fueled by hardline conservatives, to whom Benjamin Netanyahu, a prime minister still facing corruption charges, is now beholden for power. Chaos on the streets, in Parliament too. In February, this was the Constitution, Law and Justice Committee, chaired by a member of the far-right religious Zionist Party and a key architect of these deeply contentious reforms, Simcha Rotman. We meet in the same room. Netanyahu's decision to pause the reforms, he tells me, was a mistake.
We did not think it's a good idea to stop.
Even despite the chaos in Israel?
I think the chaos in Israel was not because of the judicial reform. I think the chaos in Israel was because some members of the public and some members of the opposition decided to overthrow a legitimate, democratically elected government.
Such an accusation provokes ridicule among those at whom it's aimed. Are you worried that if you just push this through a little bit further down the track, push these reforms through, the same thing is going to happen all over again and Israel will erupt once more?
I think that if we don't pass a judicial reform, Israel will erupt, one way or the other.
As Israeli society fights over its political and religious identity, the backdrop from the occupied territories is one of escalating violence. Israeli settlers attacked by Palestinians, Palestinians by Israeli settlers, who grow emboldened now by the presence in government of previously fringe settler ultra-nationalists like Itamar Ben-Gvir. Israel's national security minister was once convicted for inciting racial hatred. Now, supposedly, he's been promised a new National Guard security force in return for his support on this pause of reforms. In Jerusalem last night, as elsewhere in Israel, it prompted yet more people to take to the streets.
It will deteriorate the situation in the West Bank. It will deteriorate the situation in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem and in Haifa, everywhere. The streets will not be quiet. He is lying to his electorate, basically, promising them security when he will only bring bloodshed.
He can use it against Palestinians, he can use it against leftists, he can use it against anyone who does not follow his party line. And it's a scary thought. It's a scary thought.
Whether their fears of a new Israeli security force are realized or not, By Tuesday, the White House had clearly heard enough. Netanyahu's divisive agenda now prompting this rare presidential rebuke.
They cannot continue down this road.
Israel, replied Netanyahu pointedly, is a sovereign country which makes its decisions by the will of its people, who now needs, says this supporter of his judicial reforms, to find a compromise.
People are frightened, both sides are very angry, and I think that people now feel that someone is kidnapping both sides, their democracy, their country, their vote in both sides. And I think that we need to calm down, but we do need to take this. In my dreams, we continue with different reforms, with different ingredients of this reform.
Yet for many, this is now a no-compromise battle for the very future of Israeli society, framed in a deeply polarized dispute about the meaning of democracy itself. Few are in the mood for concessions when the stakes are this high.
Andy Davies reporting there. Well, earlier I spoke to the former Foreign Minister of Israel, Tzipi Livni, and I began by asking her what was at stake in her country and why she herself had decided to get involved in the opposition protests.
Just after the elections, when I heard the plans of the Israeli Justice Minister, he put a plan on the table that the meaning was to reduce the power of the Supreme Court, of all the judicial system, the gatekeepers within the government. The coalition, the Prime Minister wants to control the Supreme Court, something which is completely anti-democratic, not just as a system, but also against Israel's values, Israel balance, Israel nature as a Jewish democratic state.
There's a bit of an irony, isn't there, that supporters of the bill say, well, you're protesting for democracy, but actually, isn't it anti-democratic to be trying to get rid of a bill that a democratically elected government has put forward? What do you say to them?
No, democracy doesn't mean to get a license, not only to drive, but to ruin and to destroy all the policing on the way or the road signs and saying, I can do whatever I want without any supervision, without judicial institutions, without anything. This is against democracy itself, and you cannot do it. I mean, you cannot just be elected and the next day say, okay, we are not a democracy anymore. We are going to be, I don't know, dictatorship, something like this. You can't.
Dictatorship?
No, this is...
You use the word dictatorship advisedly or not?
It's more about authoritarian leaders with another aspect that exists in Israel, because we are having also within this coalition also religious groups.
But they were voted in, though. I mean, that's not a dictatorship, is it?
No, it's a historical moment in which you have in the same government a combination of those that what was written in the Declaration of Independence, equality without discrimination, is something that they are deeply against it.
There is an irony, isn't there, that all these people turn out to protest now, but they haven't protested in support of Palestinians living under occupation.
I think that for the first time, and I agree with you, because this was not on the table in the last rounds of elections in Israel, but now people understand that those that are against equality, those that are against democracy, their dream is at first to weaken Israel's democracy and later annex the territories, and this will lead us or will condemn us to an ongoing conflict, bloody conflict.
Netanyahu has only paused this judicial overhaul. Do you think he will make a renewed attempt to get it through?
So I think that maybe they will learn their lesson and will try to do it in a different manner. Frankly, I don't know. Maybe he will try to do it less brutal, in a brutal manner. Maybe try to promote just one of the entire plan and different bills that are on the table. I don't see a moment in which we really can create an understanding on the basics.
You say you'll carry on demonstrating, you must carry on opposing this overhaul. But where does this end? Because the religious far right, they have large families, they are growing in power. How do you... Where does it end?
The good news is that a new camp was born in Israel, in the streets. You see young people coming to demonstrate, fighting for their country. This is the creation of a new democratic camp in Israel that is going to continue fighting.